So this is a video that's titled "No, You Don't Want to Move to Japan." I'm I half agree with the economic reasoning the guy offers, just because, he was able to read it off of the internet, and even then it's kind of hit and miss. Mm. Once he gets into the culture, like that is it. His takes are like garden variety weeaboo tier. The man obviously does not know shit about. Most of his takes are conjecture or just, rumors and hand-me-downs from tourist Twitter. And by tourist, I mean like people who are actively trying to invade liking Japan as a hobby. Excuse me. So yeah, prepare your rage helmets because we gonna rage. It's very loud. That's very loud.
I know the job market over here is bad, but I'll find a way. Just like my favorite anime character, Itsumi Rinkaro from Ota Ota Rinkaro. Everyone will learn to love me, and I'll learn to love and appreciate them too. Then, one day...
Well, the job market in Japan isn't trash. It's just that if you're trying to... Okay, I'm kind of rolling back to the economy segment, but basically if you're trying to install yourself as a service, as an entry-level employee in Japan, that's a bad fucking idea. Because they have entry-level staff that's native to the country. Why the fuck do they need you? Naturally, you're going to experience resistance. So maybe don't do that.
I'll find true love from an extremely skinny and pasty white woman with blue hair, big eyes, and massive tits. Let's be honest here, Japan has a bit of an image problem. And I don't mean a Dr. Disrespect kind of image problem. I mean one of unrealistically high expectations.
Didn't it turn out that all the Dr. Disrespect was fake?
Whether that be due to an incorrect perception of Japanese culture because of anime, a belief in a purely honorable and polite nation, or some twisted hypersexual...
I mean, Japan is still largely a traditional high-trust society, so that's not entirely inaccurate, and their culture is informed by saving face. That is by extension an honorable society. It's just that expressions of it are going to be different. And yes, you will have, in any high trust society, you will have the statistically irrelevant number of people who still exist who operate on violating the trust of said high trust society.
Interpretation of its lifestyle. As much as I understand, most don't fully believe in it.
If you inform your view of Japan strictly from shonen anime, you are a retard, and why are we even entertaining that position?
Any of these three ideas, you'd be hard-pressed to find people in the, quote, Japan is amazing crowd who don't fall victim to one of these misconceptions.
I feel seen and attacked at the same time by this guy's drip. That's... Okay, I dress slightly more appropriately. I don't have a fedora, and my haori is better fitted and generally of better quality. I do wear geta on a daily basis.
In this part of the video, I'm going to weave my own experiences alongside the thoughts and experiences of others to make sure you're getting the most well-rounded view of it.
Important to note that his experiences are of a short-term tourist, from what I can tell.
At all. For now, let's start in a more generalized place and work our way inwards. Xenophobia is something many...
Xenophobia is based.
...of us have heard from Japan. If you're new to the English language or aren't totally sure what that means, you're probably not American. But what that basically means is the fear...
It's in-group preference, which is a normal human preference and a normal baseline behavior.
Fear of people from other countries. Again, while I must stress it,
it's not exactly a fear of people from other countries, it's more of a derision.
This is not a universal statement for Japan. Many foreigners, often due to race or ethnicity, are discriminated upon in Japan. This obviously...
No, they're not.
...happens in other countries too, but the main reason...
The point is that much of society turns a blind eye, doesn't care about this kind of behavior, while much of the rest of the world at least a negative view of it. No, they shouldn't. It's perfectly fine that they do that. It's not their problem that you feel personally slighted. Skill issue.
The reason I'm talking about it here is because Japan is, again, often idealized unnecessarily and tends to attempt avoiding this image. While the problem is often
avoiding, that's why I like it.
...blown a bit, there are lots of subtle things that may or may not affect your ability to live here comfortably. I will say, personally, I didn't experience any noticeable discrimination, but I'm also a tall, skinny white guy, so there's that.
I mean, as a tall, skinny white guy, you will stand out like a sore thumb. So, like, if there was any violent discrimination, trust you me, you would be on the receiving end of it.
An anecdote from one of my friends I'd like to tell is this. His dad, who's Puerto Rican, which if you didn't know is an island territory of the United States that's mostly inhabited by Hispanic people, went to Japan on a business trip sometime before COVID. Just to note, his dad specifically is
Oh god, Japan before COVID, my beloved.
definitely not a white person. After arriving at this hotel, he decided to get to the pool. Once he got in, every single Japanese person got up and left.
So, what kind of pool was it? Was it an onsen pool? How did he get into the pool? Did he follow the correct protocol for getting into a shared body of water? Because there's an improper and a proper way of doing that, and the story provides no context outside of just farming outrage. So I'm going to chalk this up to the whole bus stood up and clapped.
There's instances of stuff like this on public transport, people getting up moving seats.
People spacing out to get more personal space is generally normal. In addition to that, non-Asians have BO, as opposed to Asians that take significantly longer to develop BO. So you just may have an offensive odor about you.
Etc. It's not overly common, but it's also more.
But also, imagine clutching pearls over someone sitting away from you. Like, are we realistically just starting? Are we equating dropping a hard R neighbor with someone just changing seats because they don't want to be next to you? From the sound of you, my guy, I don't want to be sitting next to you. I'm arguably paler, if not whiter.
More noticeable than in America or Europe for most places. Like I said, every country has issues like that, but I want to help bring some people back down to earth about how Japan may be represented in television or otherwise. I mean,
How
you've
is it
probably seen it.
represented?
Most anime you watch.
So, first of all, Japan does not have a universal representation in media. Just because media represents different aspects of Japanese life, it's a variety of different genres, and also a lot of anime and manga does not take place in Japan. He's showing us Hunter x Hunter. From what I recall, Hunter x Hunter doesn't really take place in real Japan.
Have people of like every skin color.
Neither does Attack on Titan. Attack on Titan is taking place in what? It's like fantasy, early 20th century Europe.
Color and race and
Also, yeah, One Piece.
gender and
JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, well, okay, some of it takes place in Japan. Now that I try to think of it, the only parts of JoJo that take place in Japan are like the bad parts of JoJo that I don't like to watch because they don't have enough muscular men in them. So, England, America, and where else does Joseph go? Egypt? No, not Egypt. Egypt is Stardust Crusader is in Egypt, right? The first arc is mostly in England, and I forget wherever the fuck everything else happens to Joseph Joestar.
genuinely in
I think it's American Europe.
impressive amount of diversity, which can potentially mislead people into how some areas of Japan.
Oh, this shop is exclusive use for Japanese. Based. Based. How about Jotaro as a common male body shape? God, I wish. We must aspire to a future where we're all tier 5 bodybuilders. That is why I can't watch later JoJo. Like I've enjoyed Stardust Crusader and at Diamond is Unbreakable where they started sneaking in twinks. I just tuned out. I can't watch this shit. That's it. I'm sorry, but the homoeroticism has become too overt. I can no longer enjoy this without big muscular men.
May treat foreigners. Now, onto a problem that's mostly unique to Japan.
So signs like that,
Mislead people into how some areas of Japan may treat foreigners.
it's not that they treat foreigners like that specifically. They treat people who are not integrated into the culture. And those are very different things. That's why it is correct to say that Japan is xenophobic. It is incorrect to say that Japan is racist. It means that participating in Japanese society is performative, as in there is an expectation of you meeting social convention and performing within bounds of social conventions. Basically, it's a color by numbers kind of thing. And signs like this are usually aimed at warding off people who are either unwilling or incapable, usually unwilling, of functioning within that convention. And the staff just does not want to bother with your fucking tourist ass.
Now, onto a problem that's mostly unique to Japan. over-sexualization and sex crime. If you're a woman, or in some cases, a man who dresses feminine, this part's for you.
There's a word for that I unfortunately can't say on Twitch.
Do you notice how in literally every anime, except ones made by a woman, Fullmetal Alchemist being a fantastic example, largely speaking...
Do I have to break out the plethora of mangas by big-tittied women about big-titty women?
All of the women have this extremely over-sexualized vibe to their clothes,
yes, and?
mannerisms, and general demeanor. What about the amount of anime and manga that features...
Oh shit, imagine women being pleasant to be around and to see.
some aloof loser.
I understand how living in certain parts of America that may be a concept bordering on fiction.
Or somehow stumbling into some magical world or perfect school where a bunch of high school girls are just absolutely gobsmacked by him and constantly want to get in his pants.
Oh no, it's almost as if that's the target audience of that particular form of media, and it's self-insert / Gary Stewish character prototypes, and like those are not even defining examples of Japanese media.
What about the permeation of lolly culture into the media and in other places where
Lolly culture does not permeate into the media. Lolly is still seen as pretty weird.
they really shouldn't be, like with massage parlors and escorts? Well, we'll get into this.
What? Excuse me? Why are you pointing at a maid cafe solicitor and saying that that's an escort? My brother in Christ, what the fuck are you on? Massage parlors?
Specifics later, but for now, let's...
Like, well, first of all, there are no recruiters, there are no callers standing and dragging people into massage parlors. Mostly because most massage places don't want to deal with foreigners. So they advertise themselves in a way that is to be understood only by Japanese. That's why good, reputable massage parlor places that are not glorified whorehouses, and even some of the whorehouses do that. They only have signage in Japanese and terminology that is understandable only to Japanese people. So yeah, and you know, the character of the traffic that they expect is not what would usually respond to people trying to pull your sleeve and drag you into one of the establishments.
Preface the current situation with some actual events that have showcased how out of control this has gotten in Japan. I guess a good place to start would be the adult escorts there's often spotted and often had come up to us while walking around in Tokyo and Osaka. This obviously...
Where in Tokyo?
...is not unlike...
Where in Tokyo are there adult escorts walking up to people in Tokyo and Osaka? That is not a real thing. There is one street in Kabukicho where women of loose morals engage in papakatsu. And that's like a single known street with prostitutes. There is just the one. Because everything else is just girls advertising hostess bars or maid cafes, depending on, again, what neighborhood you're in. Because what you're describing is just not a thing that happens.
Other places that you can travel to. But the difference here is the clothing and general aesthetic the organization...
Best you can do is show a maid cafe outfit, which is similar but less lascivious. So yes, that is a maid cafe caller. She's a maneki, as we refer to them. She's advertising a maid cafe. It's likely taken in Akihabara because Akihabara has a high density of maid cafes for obvious reasons.
Running these establishments and managing these escorts put on for tourists and locals alike.
There are no escorts put on for tourists, you fucking Oh, fuck. Okay,
Many
I'm
of them
getting...
are dressed in childlike clothing or maid outfits.
No, they're not.
And have tons of...
It's not childlike clothing, you fucking... Oh, God. It's one of those. It's one of those. Okay, so there is a fundamental misunderstanding of what is moe culture. Does moe culture lean on certain tropes that are quote-unquote childlike? Yes and no. They make use of certain visual elements. Some of them are called Lolita, not to be confused with Lolly. For example, the Harajuku fashion scene is just all about that cutesy shit. It doesn't necessarily indicate children. It means girls who want to dress cute. And yes, the attire is going to usually gravitate somewhere around that. It has nothing to do with actual children.
Makeup on to further accentuate what are known as...
What is childish makeup? What is? I'm sorry. Why am I finding? Do children wear makeup?
as neonatal features, often involving the appearance of larger eyes alongside a smaller nose and mouth. Similarly, they talk
The appearance of larger, the appearance of larger eyes is not neonatal features. It's simply attractive characteristics and facial features that are attractive in females.
in high-pitched voices like a young schoolgirl would in most of Japanese media.
The high-pitched voices also have to do with the moe appeal. They try to advertise as being around the most fertile and therefore most attractive age.
On top of this, I've even heard of establishments that specifically roleplay high school style scenarios for customers if they pay a certain fee.
Okay, and
Often revolving around a classroom setting or a public transport.
popular sexual fantasies such as office, doctor's office, a classroom, or a train carriage. Okay. Sex workers, I assume adults. Employed at image clubs, whose activities are usually limited to oral sex, wear exaggerated costumes appropriate to the settings and design. So how is that different from just any kind of other role play? Image clubs simulating molestation of female train passengers became popular in the wake of stricter enforcement of law enforcement. I love the fucking hustle of just zooming in on that fucking market. But to the subject, oh my god, fucking school uniform fetish wear. Let me pull up Amazon real quick. Like Amazon.com, you know, the same site that fucking sells knives and is the sole reason for knife crime in the UK. Get the fuck out. So, school girl lingerie outfit for women is the first search result. Boom. Checkmate, Twitter. Those don't look like Japanese seirofuku. That does not look like. Well, okay, this one, like the what, the 11th result down is patterned after a Japanese school uniform. The other ones are very much not. It's almost as if attraction to young women of fertile age, especially, you know, hearkening back to an age when most men go through puberty, and therefore there are certain fixations that are left over, usually benign ones, because I'm not sure if you're aware of that, but adult women can also wear school uniforms. I'm not sure if OP has been has had access to that particular study, but adult women can in fact just wear different clothes.
Setting. This is really unlike anywhere else I've ever been to or heard of.
Okay. Oh. Okay, you know what? Never mind. I will concede one point. There are probably not fetish clubs that cater to that particular set of proclivities, because most sex adjacent work is not structured the same way that it is in Japan. But I am pretty sure that you can go into a whorehouse in Germany and you can pay for the hooker to wear a school uniform.
It really prefaces this situation on how out of control it has gotten. That's not to mention other
Excuse me, what is out of control exactly?
strange things like that used panties vending machine or billboard showing.
So the allegedly used panty machines and the masturbators, you know where those are found, my guy? Those are found in adult stores. What were you doing in an adult store? What were you doing in a sex shop, and why are you surprised that you are finding inappropriate things in the deep end of the adult store, I might add? Like shit like that, it's not you don't find that near the sponsored Tenga stand, you know what I mean? Like usually you need to go a couple of flights of floors up in order to even find that shit. So have you been caught gooning in 4K? Also, what is the problem of having an own a hole gotcha? Like I like, again, I've seen those. I know where those are. But that's because I don't hide the fact that, yeah, I've been in those establishments. I'm also not the one trying to cast shade at Japan. Nyoitsuki. I'm not gonna translate that.
showing young anime women in bikinis or
Those are Blue Archive characters. Like, all of these are Blue Archive characters. Yes, Blue Archive buys a lot of advertising space in Akihabara. Them and Azur Lane. Gee, I wonder why.
other forms of revealing clothing everywhere.
That's also a full body swimsuit, by the way.
Or billboards showing young anime women in
That's not a bikini, that's like a school mizugi.
bikinis or other forms of revealing clothing everywhere. I promise you I'm not being a prude. It doesn't offend me, but it's something.
You don't strike me as a prude. Like, you strike me as someone who pays for OnlyFans, but you pearl clutch about things you don't understand, and then you fill in the gaps by shit that's just incorrect.
Off-putting to see in a public and well-traveled area rather than in the usual red.
That's a public area that's built. So the example that you've shown just now is Akihabara. Akihabara is an area that very specifically is built around anime and moe culture. Like, you are literally walking into a forest and asking, why the fuck are there so many trees there?
Red light district or in a more adult-centered area. The
I don't know, maybe because the target audience of gachas are not people who go to red light districts?
sexualization and frequent pushing of childlike features in sexualized mediums has really created a lot of issues. What might those be? Well, let's talk about.
Sexualization is a Marxist talking point about taking away the media that you're like. It is the mirror image of Melanie Mack. Both should be disregarded and ignored.
Some of them. Some of us know the fact that, at least until recently, the age of consent in Japan was an eye-watering 13 years old. 13! This led to a notorious.
It's an old law that was recently changed, and it didn't imply that it was okay for adult men to have sex with 13-year-old girls. It implied that children amongst themselves could consent to sexual relations between themselves after the age of 13. Is that correct for our modern sensibilities and basically the offset adulthood that most people experience? No, but that's why the law was updated.
Sketchy legal framework that often let people who abused kids off with minimal repercussions. This all came to a head in 2023 when a 50.
I have no idea about the Rory Kenshin stuff, or whatever the other one is, so I will not comment on that.
56-year-old Japanese politician thought it would be, quote, strange if he was arrested for having intercourse with a 14-year-old girl.
Cause I like high school girls, that's why!
Saying this in America would have your head splattered against a brick wall by some people, but for most of recent Japanese history, this would have been seen as a problem by only a small but growing contingent of everyday citizens.
It's almost as if Japan is an entirely different culture with a different lifestyle and different life cycle of people going through adulthood. And again, granted, the schooling ages have moved along, but you could also look at some of the extracurricular activities that the women get around to at those ages. And you know what? Some women are better off being married off at 14 years old. Because left to their own devices and their own choices about sexual behavior, for some reason they turn out to be raging whores.
The government, however.
Before you go to, there's an observation you need to get off your chest. Okay, go ahead.
Was silent on this issue for decades, still basing their age of consent on a law from 117 years ago.
I think we need to base more things on laws from 117 years ago.
Finally, with these comments, the Japanese parliament voted to raise the age of consent from 13 to 16, which is still quite low compared to many other countries.
It's the age of consent is 16 in the US, my guy. And most of Europe, by the way.
They also finally
Don't tell them about the age of consent in Islam.
Define what they called, quote, forced intercourse, as now belonging under a general guise of non-consent. Basically, until very recently, there were numerous cases of non-consensual but non-violent cases of this act occurring that were thrown out or significantly lessened in the severity if the victim.
It's almost as if the legally opaque territory of going back on something you regret and calling it rape is not a great place to be in. And like in most social situations, it's a problem with Japanese psychology to a large extent, because the natural response for a lot of urban Asians, I don't know why it's specific to them. Maybe it's like a phenotypical thing, but the response for a lot of them is to freeze up in a state of panic, which I don't know why that happens. But yeah, that's it's. I'm not going to say that it's similar to the mid-British comic book artist that fucked his babysitter. Like it's obviously not a similar situation in all of these, but also like trying to legislate human behaviors in gray areas like that is a slippery slope. And I'm not saying that this particular change is that. I'm just saying that we need to tread very lightly. We need to understand why certain laws were written certain ways. It's ironic to you that as much as women in social media cry about men not being shit, the fact that Trump's two largest supporting forms of voters were white women in the Hispanic Latino community, that tickles you when you think about it. Uh, didn't black men also go disproportionately for Donald Trump as well, given that he's our first real black president?
Victim was over the age of 13 and, quote, could not prove that the interaction was violent. Only if they were under.
I mean, it's see, I have less protest about that. If you can't prove that something happened, maybe we shouldn't throw someone into prison for that. Like, perhaps the presumption of innocence is not a bad place to be, and is the reason why, well, common law is sort of based on that.
Under 13 was the, quote, violence part ignored. On top of this, Japan is a huge issue.
Black men were Kamala's second highest vote, but not by much. Well, yes, but didn't black men go for Donald Trump at a larger margin than they have historically gone for Republican candidates?
With minor sex crimes such as battery assault or groping on public transport. While officially, Japan's rate of non-consensual assault, sorry, I'm not trying to get demonetized, is more than 37 times less than that of the US.
Oh, so it barely happens, and these are like outlier freak accidents, like the one that the communists keep pointing towards in attempts to point that Japan is unsafe, despite the fact that it was a horrific rape and murder that was carried out by, who would have thought, boys that were raised in communist households. I wonder how the two are connected.
Because an estimated 95% of cases are not reported, and for children as well as members of the
How the fuck do you know that they take place if they're not reported? How do you record something that's not reported?
LGBT community, it's likely a lot lower. On top of this,
excuse me, the Japanese term for that is kamayaro. Please use the appropriate verbiage for the topics that you're covering.
Many schoolgirls report that this happened to them at least once while on public transport. I mean, Jesus, I remember one being on an escalator in Akihabara and seeing signs on the wall that said, quote, beware of upskirting.
Yeah, because Akihabara is a den of fucking touchless virgins who are desperate enough to do that, because it is a place that is built around anime. You can sleep easy now. Well, good night.
But what might be the root of all this behavior, and why has it continued to worsen?
No, you're not going crazy.
Over so many years. Well, my friend, that may come down to much of the media, and especially anime that's being produced in Japan, as well as a overall culture of silence.
Wait until this man discovers the existence of shunga and ukiyo-e art in general. His mind is going to be blown by the fact that the Japanese were drawing lewd manga with big tits as far back as the 16th century.
Discourages people from speaking out against their abusers. I can speak from
Me Too was a sham, and it's mostly a grift.
Experience. Japan is a huge issue with everyday over-sexualization.
No, it does not.
Especially of childlike features. As I mentioned earlier, I can give so many examples of
Habibi, stretch before you reach.
Instances where I saw escorts on the side of the street.
You did not see
escorts.
Friends
of mine while dressed in little maid skirts and wearing makeup that enhanced their more.
That you did not see escorts. You saw maneki. You saw maneki that are advertising hostess clubs, where you get to talk to a girl and pay fivefold for drinks as she attempts to badly entertain you in a conversation, but since you speak Japanese, she's not able to. And if they are dragging foreigners in, it's probably a lower end bar anyway. And the girls aren't even local. They're most commonly they're Vietnamese, Korean, and Chinese girls. They will speak English, but you're also very likely to either be roofied or just generally scammed in a bar like that. Because, well, the proper establishments do not cater to foreigners and they don't want foreigners anywhere near them. But no, they're not quote unquote escorts. This is not America, my guy. If girls are actively soliciting you, they're not soliciting you for that particular, they're not soliciting you for Mizu. They are soliciting you to go and overspend in a hostess club and then blue ball you at the end of the night.
more childlike features. Other
Makeup does not do that.
less lascivious examples involve what are known as, quote, idols, which are usually young-looking adult women in large
So you mean like pop stars in the West, where the concept was originally borrowed from?
partially revealing clothing that
Revealing clothes? Okay, sure.
sing and dance for crowds of older men in a weird
Notice the obsession with schoolgirls. Do I need to tap the sign again? Do I need to bring up the search results from Amazon.com in a Texan zip code?
hybrid of anime and real life. Here's a video I got in Osaka of this very thing happening randomly when I was walking down the street.
Yes, this is what's referred to as an indie idol group. They are doing a raivu, a live event that is organized for their fans. They don't have a lot of money to pay for venues. That's why they just do it in public spaces that are allocated for concerts. Apparently, in excess of roughly 50 people, from what I can see, are there to cheer them on because idols are a part of Japanese culture, like it or not. VTubers are an extension of idol culture, by the way, as they should be. And yeah, they're singing and dancing like pop stars because they want to make a career in music. And, you know, unlike in America, they don't even have to suck P. Diddy's dick for on camera for in order for them to do that.
This place fucking rules. As I mentioned earlier, if you've ever watched like an anime before, you've seen how often high school kids, young girls, and even trans people are sexualized.
There are no trans people in anime. The gay race communism has not permeated anime. Those are referred to as cross dressers. It's a very specific fetish that is frowned upon justifiably. I know that he makes a disclaimer he's not bringing up astralphobe, probably because trans people aren't really an item that is commonly featured in anime, because why the fuck would it be? There's no such thing as trans people in anime, there are cross dressers. Deal with it. Because, again, Japanese media is not poisoned by John Money's research or by any other extension of gay race communism.
A great example is an anime like Dr.
Also, perhaps the anime you're watching is mostly targeted at young boys, specifically teen boys, who are of that age. And the reason you're mostly exposed to anime and manga that is targeted at the young boys is because you are intellectually a child.
Stone, which I myself really like, but there are multiple instances of
Case in point, it's a shonen anime.
often female characters.
Don't get me wrong, shonen anime rocks, but there's a spectrum of shonen anime and its applicability. Like my go-to mangas that I follow right now are The Way of the House Husband. No school children featured there, not prominently. Kengan Omega. What are other ones that I follow? Those are probably my most closely followed ongoings. Yeah, if I had to say, those are probably the ones. I really like Miyotoko-chan, but unlike the anime, interestingly enough, the manga lacks fan service whatsoever. And it is legitimately the scariest shit I have ever seen. What's the other one I read? Hennaie, the obscure horror manga about architecture and interior design, also for some reason features exclusively, fully legal adult people above the age of 25. So it seems to be mostly an issue of sampling. You're going off of media that is made for pubescent boys because you likely lack the intellectual capacity to process or seek out anything more sophisticated, and now you think that all of Japanese media is like that. It's almost like the four blind men attempting to grope an elephant.
Who are canonically 16 or younger having very extreme proportions, and a large focus on
I'm pretty sure I've had girls in my school of about that age with proportions like that. So, um, L, cope and seethe, I guess.
said body parts, often unnecessarily. I don't really need to list out more examples because I'm sure you can come up with your own. On top of this, Japan has a huge issue with virginity. Yeah, really.
A quarter of Japanese people in their 20s and 30s are virgins. So it looks like the sexualization of anything is not really a problem since it's obviously not translating into any kind of real sex.
According to a study conducted in 2019, over a quarter of Japanese people under the age of 40 are virgins.
I kind of question those numbers. I would like to see their sample sizes and their research methods. It looks like rage bait, if I'm being completely transparent.
While this may seem like a bit out of left field, bear with me here. This issue is largely driven by an overworked nation of young people who have no time or ability to meet each other.
Oh,
Despite the
no.
government attempting to spur development in this way,
Oh no, it's almost as if young employees are expected to put in long hours, like Elon Musk's Doge team of 19 and 20-year-olds who put in 80-hour weeks, or like I did when I was working in audit. And for some reason, I still did okay.
they've so far failed. It's a crisis that also affects nations like South Korea and even China to an extent. What this means is that, importantly, a lot of people, specifically men, have less knowledge and experience surrounding courtship and romance, which leads to the unfortunate reality that anime and
My guy, from the way you discuss the subject, I can tell you've never touched a boob.
SFW anime, again I'm trying to keep my monetization, have led to unrealistic expectations for many. Anime such as Steins Gate, while absolutely a great anime, have perpetuated scenarios like this. A man who's a giant loser that suddenly gets involved with like 40 attractive
How is fucking how is the protagonist of Steins Gate a loser? He's a university student in like a top university. How is he a loser? Can you please explain that? How is Okabe a loser? Like, is the ratio of attractive women in his circle not exactly natural? Yes. You know why? Because the anime is based on a visual novel. The anime is based on a visual novel, and like the individual women are like single mutually exclusive routes that you take through the story. And when you put that into an anime format, you will get the appearance of a buffet setting because you don't know that specific romance options only open up under certain story paths. You would know that if you weren't a fucking tourist with a surface level understanding of the culture and the medium for that matter. Also, by the way, an anime that does not prominently feature any school children. Interestingly enough. Gee, I wonder why.
women that also finds the love of his life among them. While I'm not saying this is impossible,
Which is usually how people pair bond. They pair bond in their organic social circles. You would know that if you touched grass.
it has gradually progressed to now, in more modern anime, we have what's known as the genre of isekai.
More modern anime, as opposed to Steins Gate. I'm going to kill myself.
Isekai, for the uninitiated, is a genre that you probably heard parts of before. Someone in a usually shitty state of living one day dies or magically wakes up in some fantasy or video game world that they now have to explore and figure out. While not all follow
Also known as a self-insert fantasy.
this exact formula, it has become increasingly common. What is developed out of this
Yeah, because it's a very good setup for the odd man out in a setting. It provides more organic ways of world building in and effectively mostly high fantasy settings, and you explore those through the eyes of a protagonist who is not immersed into the setting.
is an increasing amount of stories that involve
Forced labor.
yeah, no, and I don't mean the horrors of real life examples of this.
What? Is he gonna complain about Goblin Slayer?
I mean a male loser archetype being teleported into a video game world where he purchases women and doesn't necessarily use them, but it's very much implied
Oh, it's that how to summon a demon lord. Damn, I still need to watch that. It's in my backlog.
that's the case. While this concept in full is nowhere near universal,
The worst isekai trope. Oh lord. high fantasy that is based on Middle Ages, where serfdom and slavery existed, features serfdom as slavery as a narrative method, which, by the way, is in the vast majority of cases depicted as a bad thing, by the way. I guess saying that slavery bad is also bad.
Many shows incorporate creepy elements such as this in an attempt to either satisfy the creator themselves by using a self-insert, or to satisfy often male fans who have been gradually lulled into a normalization of this concept.
A normalization of what concept? How did we jump from slavery to fuck? This is such a clusterfuck of nonsensical ideas. My guy, you are grasping at straws.
And to be fair, shows that feature this are often criticized by parts of the Japanese public and the anime community, but they're still being made to this day, which tells me that.
So shows like what? Can you please provide specific examples of what you dislike? Because so far I'm seeing very general statements, half of them fucking wrong, and others being so extremely niche that they don't warrant a discussion. And as for the reaction by parts of Japanese society, watching anime is relatively mainstream. Anime is just basically a format, a medium of story expression, usually downstream from written mediums, usually adaptations of manga and light novels. Uh, who the fuck cares? Like it's very similar to the Think of the Children crowd here. So it's not a uniquely Japanese problem. The reaction generally should be the same. If you dislike a form of media, fuck right off and don't engage with it.
That there's definitely an audience for them. The reason I talk about this is to point out its ramifications. In other words,
also, like in the entirety of Steingate's story, the tits is what the tits are the only thing that he's retained. The tits in the OVA of Steins Gate is the only thing that he has retained as a defining characteristic of the story, not the immense mental torture that Okabe goes through in the climax of the story as it's portrayed in the anime, not the horrors that he has to endure and just, barely holding on to his sanity. No, it's the tits. The tits fucking make or break Steins Gate. Jesus fucking Christ. I was not expecting to encounter a freezing temperature IQ take today. I was just not ready for something that butt fucking stupid.
How exactly does this affect everyday life in Japan? Well, I have a couple anecdotes from my time in Japan that can hopefully help illustrate this. During my last few days in Japan, I was staying in Tokyo, specifically a couple blocks away from Akihabara, also known as Electric Town. While this place is genuinely pretty cool and has lots of good food and shops, it's
everywhere in Japan has good food and shops.
Other things that were a bit of a turnoff in terms of my enjoyment of the area. Billboards and signs often featured young-looking, scantily clad anime
walks into forest. Why are there so many fucking trees?
Girls plastered everywhere, often mentioning new shows or advertising products. And
I know where this store is. It's in one of the back alleys. So again, you literally walk around the skeevier part of Akihabara, and you're surprised about seeing this. I appreciate the premise of the anime. For those of you who don't know, the title of the anime is "Show Me Your Panties While Giving Me a Scornful Look." While not my particular cup of tea, I do appreciate the fucking gumption to put that to print.
And while yes, this is not a unique concept to Japan, I promise I've been to Vegas.
That's what the fuck is this? That's a soapland. Is it not?
I've never seen anything quite like this.
Yeah, so that's a soapland. That's basically a whorehouse. Like, what part of fucking Akihabara were you in, my guy? Like, you got pretty fucking deep in. Did you get a hotel without exploring what the area is beforehand? Well, I mean, you do strike me as the type to do that. But just so that you understand, you're clutching pearls over something that's not, first of all, not a standard Japanese behavior. It is very much an Akihabara specific phenomenon. Like, you literally went to a place that was formed around that culture, and you are now complaining about that culture. Not to mention that you're also grossly misunderstanding the culture, or whatever visual accoutrements that culture has also produced.
It's genuinely a one-of-a-kind thing. Continuing the story, I was looking for a Hunter x Hunter figurine I wanted in a gift for somebody else, so I went on Google Maps to
God, that is so basic.
try to find a store that sold it. I wandered around with a friend until we stumbled across one specific store. As we
Okay, that's Kotobukiya.
walked in, it was noted that the store we needed to go to was on the 3rd story. So we got in the elevator, noticed the 3rd story was blocked off. We figured we'd check out the 2nd story just in case there was some glitch or it was mistyped or something. When those elevator doors opened, we were immediately blindsided by naked anime women everywhere. Some even being underage.
No, don't get me.
Where are we right now? Dude, yeah, oh my.
So you walked into one of the buildings, and you walked into the dojin floor, and you're shocked that there were dojins.
My fucking god, we should do.
See, this is why I can instantly tell that this is just a tourist. It is someone who has gone to Japan apparently once, because he does not understand what Akihabara is. He is a violent grade tourist who likely watches fucking dubs, and he watches mainstream slop at that. And he doesn't understand that if you walk into a building and you go to a floor that has dojins on it, you're going to see dojins. And apparently he doesn't know what dojins are, since his frame of reference is anime, so I assume he doesn't read the source material.
To say we didn't really stay long. This is not a one-time occurrence either. We'd frequently wander into stores and start climbing stairs to see where we'd end up, only to find ourselves in the back of the store with NSFW manga and other...
Have you tried reading the signs on those stores? Like, you are in Akihabara. You walk into a store that likely indicates what is on which floor, and you're surprised that you walk into the dojin section?
lewd images plastered all over the wall.
I'm sorry, I'm just lost for words here. I don't know how can I clown on this individual even harder, because life has already dealt him a pretty bad hand of cards.
Even figurines in regular shops that had storefronts facing the...
That's Chitanda Eru from Hyoka, if I recall correctly.
Street.
I don't recognize the other ones.
Feature hypersexualized feminine characters on full display for everyone to see. Again, I'm not trying to be a prude. I'm a grown-ass adult. This isn't really offending.
You don't strike me as a full-grown ass adult, at least intellectually.
It's just how I know a lot of people might find this sort of thing weird and uncomfortable. I know that Akihabara isn't the sole representation of Japanese art and culture, but it's important to note that it's a center of nerd culture in Japan.
Yes.
And it's a good representation of anime and a decent chunk of Japan's
no.
art culture. The further ramifications of the normalization of this kind of...
Also, it's kind of amazing that the guy actually did not manage to find any one of the secondhand figure stores in Akihabara, which are actually significantly easier to find than the adult stores, or rather the dojin stores. So most of the figure stores are clearly visible. They are on the main street of Akihabara. And in order to find the dojin places, you actually need to try. You need to actually walk around, and you need to try, and you need to look for them. So my guess is Homeboy was looking for some goon material and is attempting to walk it back.
Kind of sexualization of childlike concepts and a generally lax attitude towards sexualization in the first place show themselves in the laughably light punishments child offenders get in Japan, as well as a hush-hush culture involving offenses on people.
Japan's male-dominant conservative society based makes it difficult for victims to come forward. Yeah, especially if there's no proof, sure. Legal red tape furthers complicated reporting and silencing survivors. I'm pretty sure that if you report a crime, it's usually actioned. Me Too movement never impacted Japan the way it did in the US. Well, because the Me Too movement was about women who engaged in transactional sexual relations with men that they did not find attractive, and then they either did not receive the success that they thought that they were going to receive, so they feel like they were cheated out of the other end of the transaction, or they just wanted to cash in on a fresh scandal in an era where you just generally didn't need to prove shit. You could just claim stuff, like it happened with Brett Kavanaugh.
people of all ages. Good examples of this include manga writer and artist Nobuhiro Watsuki, who, after being caught possessing underage material, was given a
Hundreds of child porno. See, if you're found with CP, I think you just should get the chair.
fine of $1,800. He was actually, at the time, currently writing a manga that had to be put on hiatus after his charges went public. Then, after he got caught and paid the fine, the manga resumed serialization, like nothing ever happened.
I mean, if you have an issue with that, just don't consume Rory Kenshin. I don't. Partially because of that. Like,
even if someone got off with a light punishment for such a crime basically anywhere else, there's no way in hell they'd ever see the light of day in that industry again. Similarly, the writer Tatsuya Matsuki was arrested and charged with 2 counts of indecent act on a female middle school student. He was given a sentence of 1.5 years, but it was instead
well, 1.5 years in Japanese prison.
suspended, and he walked away a free man. Now, to be fair, his manga did not resume after this, but it still details how offenders
Oh, there you go.
often receive very light punishments for their actions. That's on top of the earlier mentioned cultural issues with calling
What are cultural issues?
out this kind of behavior publicly. So many cases like this probably go unreported or are thrown out
Probably, so you don't know, so you're talking out of your ass. Noted.
privately in some way. Even if a punishment is given, it's often in terms of a civil case where a victim is awarded money for damages, but not a criminal case where the perpetrator actually received jail time for their actions.
I would have to see a source on that. I'm not going to make any deliberation. I definitely am not going to go off of the second-hand information that this guy got from Twitter, because he obviously does not know what the fuck he's talking about when it comes to the subject of Japan. There's a part 4. Oh no. Oh, there's a conclusion. Okay, let's hear the conclusion. Excuse me.
Is Japan a really, really fun place to visit for most people? Oh yeah, 100%. I had an absolutely fantastic time while visiting, and I recommend it to basically any.
I hope they ban people like specifically you. I hope they instill a fucking language test to enter the country. I know it's unrealistic. Let me dream, please. I really hope the yen just bounces back up so that dipshits like you just can't afford to go to Japan anymore.
Anybody who's fortunate enough to go. And I guess in that sense, I should extend a huge thank you to my patrons and everybody who watched my videos, because the revenue I've acquired from running this channel actually helped pay for that
People give him money. That is, oh no, that is upsetting. That is genuinely upsetting.
trip. So every single one of you are basically a patron for this video. After hearing what you've heard today, would you actually move there? Given the frequently abusive work culture, low wages, difficulties of social integration, volatile economy, and over-sexualized media, well, I don't believe Japan is the only nation with issues like this. Again, let me make that very clear. The main reason I made this video is to help break the myth of Japanese exceptionalism and bring
That's not a myth. Japan is exceptional. Hate to break it to you, buddy. Like, if you're not capable of understanding why Japan is exceptional, monoculture, high culture, high trust culture, if you're not capable of understanding and comprehending why Japan is exceptional, you probably also don't understand why America is exceptional. And like, I can already guess all of his opinions about everything that matters, and I know that his opinions don't matter. So yeah, holy shit. Like, these people can vote.
bring some people back down to reality regarding the place. Now, of course, there are exceptions to this rule.
My brother in Christ, you've been to Japan once. Just so you've been to Japan once and you pretend like you understand shit. I'm sorry, but as someone who's been to Japan 9 separate times, I think 9, it's probably more at this point, who speaks the language fluently, who's inducted into actual Japanese culture, not I watched an anime once. Like, I am certified as in Japanese tea ceremony. I am certified with a fairly high transmission level of urasenke sado, in addition to my martial arts practice, that it also spans more than a decade now. I think my accolades outweigh you significantly, and I think I'm in a very good place to say that you, sir, don't know shit about fuck, and maybe abstain from making your ignorance known.
I've known of people who have moved to Japan and have been able to thrive just fine. However, I really believe those people are outliers, as I've heard many more stories of people feeling lonely, isolated, and generally depressed after moving there.
skill issue.
especially coming from a hyper-social society like America, or even various parts of Europe. I know this video is very different from my usual content, but please let me know if you want more of this content by subscribing.
I really wish that you would never speak of Japan again. Thank you very much.